This chapter is on the physical development in adolescence. So the next 3 chapters we will be talking about adolescence. Today we'll be talking about the physical development of adolescence. So let's get started with growth. In only a few months, adolescents can grow several inches and require a whole new wardrobe as they are transformed. During an adolescent growth spurt, a period of very rapid growth and weight, boys grow 4.1 inches a year and girls 3.5 inches a year. Some teens can grow as much as 5 inches in a single year. That's quite a bit of inches in a single year. Growth spurts begin at different times though. Girls begin their spurts around the age of 10 and boys around the age of 12. Puberty is a period during which sexual organs mature. Begins when pituitary gland in the brain signals other glands in the children's bodies to begin producing the sex hormones. The sex hormones are androgens, which is a male hormone, or estrogen, a female hormone, at adult levels. The pituitary gland also signals the body to increase production of growth hormones that interact with the sex hormones to cause a growth spurt in puberty. The hormone leptin also appears to play a role in the state of puberty. The brain's hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and gonads, the gonads in women is the ovaries, the gonads in men is the testicles, and they operate in a feedback loop that produces and maintains the levels of androgens and estrogens. The interaction between the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the gonads is known as the HPG axis. The HPG axis operates when the hypothalamus calls for the pituitary gland to release a larger or smaller amount of hormones. So in turn, the pituitary gland instructs the gonads to actually release the hormones. When the optimal level of hormones is reached, the hypothalamus tells the pituitary gland to cease increasing the levels of hormones. Girls start puberty around 11 or 12 years of age, and boys start around 13 or 14 years of age. There's a wide variation among individuals. For example, some girls begin puberty around 7 or 8 years of age. Some girls even start as late as 16 or maybe even 17 years of age. So there's a wide variation among individuals on when puberty begins. Let's talk about the puberty of girls. So it's not clear why puberty begins at a certain particular time, but we know that environmental factors, cultural factors play a big role in this. Menarche is the onset of menstruation. It varies greatly in different parts of the world. In poor developing countries, menstruation begins later than it does in more economically advantaged countries. Girls or more affluent groups begin to menstruate earlier than those in less affluent groups. Some studies have suggested weight or the proportion of fat to muscle in the body plays a critical role in the timing of menarche. So, for an example, in the U.S., athletes with a low percentage of body fat may start menstruating later than less active girls. I've heard this to be very true. In high school, I know when I was on the tennis team, wasn't a very good player of tennis, but some girls shared that they had never started and they were 16 or 17, or they had started but it ceased because they were so athletic, because they were involved with everything, and they had very little body fat on their body. Obesity leads to an earlier puberty due to the increase in the secretion of leptin. Environmental stress. Maybe parents are getting divorced. Maybe there's a high level of conflict in the household. That can bring on an early onset of menstruation. So over the past 100 years, girls in the U.S. have been experiencing puberty at earlier ages. Now, near the end of the 19th century, girls on average started around 14 or 15 years of age, Now it's 11 or 12 years of age. Why is this? Possibly due to the reduced diseases and improved nutrition. So yeah, we have vaccines for different diseases. We know how to eat more properly. A lot of us don't know um, or don't eat properly, but there's a lot of improved nutrition. We have the knowledge, we have the technology to tell us how we need to eat, how we need to improve our health. So that is why we start earlier, or girls start earlier than way before than even in the 19th century. Menstruation is just one of the several changes in puberty that are related to development of primary and secondary sex characteristics. Primary sex characteristics are associated with the development of organs and structures of body that directly relate to reproduction. Secondary sex characteristics are the visible signs of sexual maturity. So primary sexual characteristics in girls involve changes in the vagina and the uterus. Secondary sexual characteristics include the development of breast and pubic hair. Breasts begin to grow at an age of 10. The pubic hair begins to appear around the age of 11. Underarm hair appears around 2 years later. 1 in 7 Caucasian girls and 1 out of 2 African American girls develop breast and pubic hair by the age of 8. That just seems so early to me, but it definitely does happen. Let's move on and talk about puberty in boys. So the penis and scrotum begin to grow at an accelerated rate around the age of 12, and they reach adult size about 3 or 4 years later. As boys' penises enlarge, other primary sexual characteristics are developing, with the enlargement of the prostate gland and seminal vesicles, which produce semen. The boy's first ejaculation, or spermarchy, occur around the age of 13, more than a year after the body has begun producing sperm. The amount of sperm increases significantly with age. Pubic hair begins to grow around the age of 12. It's followed by underarm hair and facial hair. Boys' voices deepen as the vocal cords become longer and the larynx becomes larger. The surge in production of hormones that triggered the start of adolescence may lead to rapid swings in mood. Boys may have feelings of anger and annoyance that are associated with higher hormone levels. In girls, the emotion produced by hormone production are somewhat different. Higher levels of hormones are associated with anger and depression. So boys have more feelings of annoyance and anger. Girls have more feelings that are dealt with anger and depression. I remember my teenage years, definitely there were mood swings going on. Why? It was because of hormone levels. Levels haven't fully adjusted yet because of that puberty. And so people or teenagers get in mood swings. So just remember when you have kids, when they reach those teenage years, why they may have mood swings, it's because of the hormone levels. I'm definitely not ready for my kids to be in those teenage years. I'm not ready for those mood swings, but they are going to happen. Everybody has mood swings because of the hormones that are associated with puberty. If you have any questions about puberty, please feel free to ask. You can email it and we can discuss it on discussions, or we can discuss it on chat. Either way. Body image. Unlike babies who don't realize what is going on, adolescents are very aware of what is happening to their bodies. And they may react with horror, and they may react with joy. It is very normal for them to spend a long time in front of mirrors. There are very few teenagers that are very neutral about their changes that they are witnessing. Some changes may carry a psychological weight. So in the past, girls tend to react to menarche with anxiety because Western culture emphasized a more negative aspect of menstruation. It's messy, or there's too much cramping going on. Today, it is viewed more positively. Why? Because it is discussed more open than ever before. People are not afraid to discuss their cycles and what happens during their cycles or what happens during menstruation. So it's more open. More people talk about it nowadays. Menarche is typically accompanied by an increase of self esteem, a rise in status, and a greater self awareness. A boy's first ejaculation is roughly equivalent to the menarche in a girl. Generally, girls will tell their moms about the onset of menstruation, but boys rarely mention their first ejaculation to their parents or even to their friends. Why is this? Well, for one reason, when a girl starts their period, it requires either a tampon or a pad, and moms or parents provide those. Boys see their first ejaculation as an indication of their budding sexuality, an area which they're quite uncertain about, and they're reluctant to discuss with others. They may even feel embarrassed that it happened. Um, because they're not quite sure about their sexuality at this point. They're uncertain about everything at this point. Early maturation. For boys, early maturation is a plus. Early maturing boys tend to be more successful at athletics because of their larger size. Also, they tend to be more popular. They tend to have more positive self-concept. But it does have a downside. Boys who mature early are more apt to have difficulties in school and are more likely to become involved with delinquency and substance abuse. Why? Their larger size is one. They seek out a company of older boys who may be involved with inappropriate activities like drug and alcohol. Because they look older, older boys may talk to them, older boys may invite them to hang out with their friends and include them in all these activities that they do. Girls are different, on the other hand. Changes in their body may lead them to feel uncomfortable and different than their peers. Early maturing girls may have to endure ridicule from their less mature classmates. But it's all not negative for girls. Girls who mature early tend to be sought out after more as potential dates. Their popularity may enhance their self concepts. Late maturation. Boys who are smaller and lighter than their more physically mature peers tend to be viewed as less attractive. Because of their smaller size, they are at a disadvantage when it comes to sport activities. Boys who are expected to be bigger than their dates, so social lives of late maturing boys may suffer. Late maturation for boys leads to a decline in self-concept, and this can last well into adulthood. Coping with the challenges of late maturation may actually help boys in some ways. Late maturing boys grow up to have several positive qualities, such as assertiveness and insightfulness. Late maturing girls has a positive picture. Girls who mature later may be overlooked in dating and other mixed sex activities during junior high and may even have a lower status in junior high and high school. But by the time 10th grade rolls around, their bodies have begun to mature visibly. Late maturing girls' satisfaction with themselves and their bodies may be greater than that of early matures. They may even end up with fewer emotional problems in the end. Let's talk about nutrition and food. So the rapid physical growth of teens is fueled by an increase in food consumption. During teen years, boys require 2,800 calories and girls require 2,200 calories. Teens need calcium to help bones grow. Teens also need iron as well. But most teens don't even eat a healthy, balanced meal. 1 in 5 teens are overweight, and 1 in 20 can be formally classified as obese. Obese teen stands for an 80% chance of becoming an obese adult. I remember being in high school, eating all the high school cafeteria food. It was not healthy. There were not many healthy choices in high school. I remember they had like a salad bar. It was kind of like a Subway. You can go in and get a sandwich, or they can make you a salad. That was the only healthier choice. I remember there was a pizza line, there was chicken fried steak line, they had Mexican food line. So they had a whole bunch of unhealthy choices and very few or limited healthy choices. Most of my friends and I did not make the healthy choices. Occasionally we did, but a lot of times we ate cookies for lunch, or we ate chicken fried steak on the day chicken fried steak was available. But when you get older, it's harder to get that weight off. Teenagers shed that weight pretty fast. But again, parents need to watch out what their teens eat at home as well. Parents don't have full control over a teenager, but they can have somewhat control over what they eat at home. If it's not in the pantry, if it's not in the refrigerator, a teen can't eat it. So parents need to have healthy choices for teens, especially at home. A parent can't necessarily tell a teen what to do at school and how to eat at school, but they can at least have healthy choices at home. Eating disorders. So one eating disorder is anorexia nervosa. This is a severe eating disorder in which individuals refuse to eat. Their troubled body image leads them to deny that their behavior and their appearance are out of the ordinary. Around 15 to 20% of victims literally starve themselves. It primarily affects women between the ages 12 to 40. Most of these women are very intelligent, they're very successful, and they're very attractive white women. But it's becoming more of a problem for boys. About 5 to 15% of victims are males. So you have the gay males that may have anorexia. You also have straight males that may have anorexia as well. So these people that have anorexia, they eat very little. People with anorexia are often focused on food, so they eat very little, but they may talk a lot about food. They may go shopping often for food. They may collect cookbooks. They may even, again, talk about food a lot. They may cook huge meals for family or for friends, but they won't eat. Another one eating disorder is bulimia. This is characterized by binging, which is eating a large quantity of food, followed by purging of food, or by vomiting of the food, or using laxatives. Bulimics may eat a whole gallon of ice cream or other unhealthy food, a large quantity of it. But after they eat, after that binge, they feel guilty, they feel depressed, and then they intentionally rid themselves of the food. So they vomit the food, or they take a laxative to get the food out of their system. The weight of bulimics remains fairly normal, but the disorder is very hazardous. The constant vomiting, the constant diarrhea may produce a chemical imbalance that can lead to heart failure. I've even heard of, we're not getting into full detail, but I even heard that especially the constant vomiting over and over and over again, if you have months and years of this, it eventually tears a hole in your esophagus. Same thing with the diarrhea. It can tear holes in your esophagus. It can tear holes in your colon. So it's a very hazardous disorder. Another eating disorder is called binge eating. So this is a severe eating disorder in which individuals eat large quantity of foods. They often eat it quickly, and they often eat it to the point of discomfort. They experience a loss of control, and they feel the loss of control, and then they eat out of control. They feel also a loss of shame because they ate so much. There is no purging in this. They just eat. They just binge eat. They eat to the excessive amount. Victims become quite obese. It often starts in teen years. So about 40% of those with the binge eating disorder are male. Have y'all ever watched My 600-Pound Life? I've been addicted to that show. I love watching that show. But it's not it focuses on a 600-pound person, and they go to this doctor in Houston that does the weight loss surgery, and he gets them on a very, very strict diet. And it basically shows if they can stay on this diet or not. It's a very strict diet. They have to learn how to eat the proper way. It's more of the keto diet, I believe, where they cut out their carbs, they cut out the sugar, and again, it's very strict. If you haven't watched the show, I think it's a very interesting show. Like I said, I was addicted to watching it because it is very interesting. It's very interesting to see if they can get the weight loss surgery. Some of them can't even eat the right way. They can't lose the weight to even get the weight loss surgery. So it's very interesting if you haven't watched it. The reason for the occurrence of eating disorders are not clear, although there are several factors that appear to be implicated. So dieting often precedes the development of these eating disorders. Society is one of them. Society tells us that slender is the most beautiful and fat is very ugly. Girls who mature early and who have higher levels of body fat are more susceptible to eating disorders during the late teenage years. Teens who are clinically depressed are also more likely to develop an eating disorder. Some experts agree that there are biological causes for eating disorders. Lots of twin studies have been done on eating disorders, and they said that there's a genetic component to the disorders. There's hormonal imbalances that occurs in these sufferers or the victims of these eating disorders. Others say that eating disorders emphasize psychological and social factors. Disorders are as a result of being a perfectionist, of having over-demanding parents. Culture also plays a role. Anorexia is only found in cultures that idolize slender female bodies. Anorexia is not prevalent outside of the U.S. I've heard of parents, really watching their children eat. They can only eat certain things. They can't have any kind of sugar, any kind of this or that that's not healthy. This is where that would come into play. Maybe once in their teenagers, where parents don't have full control over their kids, that the teenager would just go overboard and eat all the sugar, eat all the carbs that they want, because the parents were strict. So I absolutely have heard this happening, where over demanding parents watching their child eat, and they need to eat what the parents say, can definitely cause binge eating or anorexia or bulimia. Some kind of eating disorder doesn't happen all the time, but it definitely can. Moving on to brain development. I don't have any notes on this, but I do have a video to watch. So let's watch this video on brain development.
Teen brain development is a fascinating part of the development during adolescence. And I think it's important for parents to know that the brain is a work in progress during the teen years. And in fact, the brain is not fully developed until about 25 years of age. Certainly, young people also may have a heightened kind of emotional response to things that are happening during the adolescence. One of the things that we know, an important concept, is that the limbic system, which has to do with pleasure and reward, is a little bit stronger during the teen years than something else called the prefrontal cortex, which has to do with logic and rational thought and self-awareness. And that partly is the reason why teenagers may experience things in a heightened way, because the limbic system, which has to do with emotions and pleasure and reward, is much stronger. And I think parents probably still remember the music they listened to when they were a teenager, and maybe remember their first crushes or attractions, because all of those experiences and feelings are much stronger during the teen years. The other thing that we know is that the frontal lobe is very much developed during the adolescence period, and connections are being fully made to the brain during that time. And we know that that area is very much part of executive functioning and decision making. And it isn't until later that in adolescence that all of these connections are fully made. So for all of these reasons, we know that teen brain development is really important in terms of emotional decision making in adolescence, and that certainly protecting the teen brain and getting young people to sleep well, to eat well, to not use alcohol and drugs, which all affect the teen brain, is a very important part of what we can do as parents to guide them.
Stress. We all know that teenagers stress out, and I hate to tell you, but stress never does end in life. There's always going to be stressors in life. We are going through stress right now with the coronavirus. Some of you may be stressed out because school is all online now. Hopefully, my class is not stressing you out. Hopefully, I have it simple enough for you to figure it out. If not, let me know. I want to know how I can better this class by being online. Just let me know. Stress. What is stress? So, stress is a physical response to events that threaten or challenge us. I want to show you a video. A video. It explains the stress about section of this chapter. So here's a video that explains stress and how it works.
I'm Dr. Bill Kafalis. I'm the Medical Director of the University of New South Wales Health Service. Stress is a normal thing for a human being. What happens in your body is that adrenaline is pumped through your arteries, and your heart goes faster, your pulse goes up, your blood pressure goes up. People can feel their head pounding. People can feel themselves flushed or sweaty. People can feel that their vision's not quite right. They can feel a bit sick in the stomach. They can have a very worried feeling in their mind. In, say, an exam situation, we know from a lot of research that your performance in an exam actually improves as your stress level increases to a certain point. At that point and after, if you become too stressed, then your performance decreases. So, of course, that's a negative aspect of stress. The other negative aspects of stress can be that if it goes on for a long time, then you can be worried and thinking about things in a very negative way for long periods of time, which can really sort of wear you down. It can make you tired. It can give you long-term headaches. It can even lead sometimes to depression if it goes on for too long. As parents, when we know that our children are going through difficult times, we need to be on the lookout for some changes in behaviour or things that they might be feeling that might signal that they're suffering from excessive stress. Things like poor sleep, getting to bed too late, feeling quite fatigued or not being themselves, saying they're tired all the time, maybe not eating very well. They might be telling us that they've got headaches or that they've got their tummies playing up again, sitting in their room a lot of the times on the weekends and when they're usually out with their friends. So these sorts of things we have to be mindful of and think that that might be a sign that they're suffering from excess stress.
Moving on to threats to teens' well-being, let's talk about illegal drugs. So they're very common in teenagers. 1 in 15 high school seniors smoke marijuana on a daily basis or near daily basis. The marijuana usage has remained at a fairly high level over the past decade, and attitudes about its use have become more relaxed. Marijuana is a very big controversy right now. I think eventually it will become legal everywhere in the United States. What do you think? Let me know. Should it be legal in Texas? I think definitely it will be one day. there's a lot of controversy, as well as people are saying you can't get addicted to marijuana. Well, that's not the case. You definitely can get addicted to marijuana. There are a few documentaries out there that show people getting addicted to marijuana and what they go through to withdraw from this marijuana, from their addiction. So yeah, you can definitely get addicted to marijuana. Teens have a variety of reasons for using illegal drugs. Some use it for pleasure. Others try to escape from the pressures or stresses of everyday life. Some try it just to get a thrill out of it. Another newest reason as to try illegal drugs is to enhance academic performance. So, a growing number of high school students are using drugs like Adderall. Adderall is prescribed for ADHD. They use it to increase their focus, to increase the ability to study for many hours. I definitely don't recommend this at all. I've heard a lot of stories on this as well. If you have ADHD, your Adderall is going to help you. If you don't have ADHD, Adderall is not going to help you at all. I've heard both sides to that. So I definitely don't recommend using Adderall to help you in your academic performance. Again, if you have ADHD, yes, it's definitely going to help you focus more, help you even to study more. But if you don't have it, don't use it. Let's move on to alcohol. 3/4 of college students have something in common. They consumed at least one alcoholic beverage during the past 30 days. More than 40% say they've had 5 or more drinks within the past 2 weeks, and about 16% drink 16 or more drinks per week. High school kids are drinkers too. Nearly 3/4 of high school seniors reported having consumed alcohol by the end of high school. About 2/5 have done or drank some kind of alcohol by the end of the 8th grade year. More than 1/2 of 12th graders and nearly 1/5 of 8th graders say they have been drunk at least once in their lives. Binge drinking. What is binge drinking? It is defined for men as drinking 5 or more drinks in one setting. For women, women tend to weigh less, and women body absorb alcohol less efficiently. It is defined as drinking 4 or more drinks in one setting. So even drinking moderately has potential negative consequences. Alcohol slows the functioning of the cerebral cortex and the frontal lobe, which is responsible for planning, decision making, and even self control. So, in the long run, alcohol can permanently damage nerve tissue in the brains of heavy drinkers. The thickness of the cortex is also affected by the alcohol. I want to show you a video about teens and drinking. I think this is a very interesting video. So let's watch the video.
Hey everyone, Lacey Green here for D News. By the stats, most teenagers have tried alcohol by the time they turn 16. Of those teens, most go on to have a healthy, moderate relationship with alcohol as adults, but others, not so much. Amongst high schoolers, about 1/4 report binge drinking, which means having 4 or more drinks in a row. In a new study published in the journal Nature, neurologists have managed to find a way to predict which 14-year-olds will become binge drinkers by the time they're 16, with 70% accuracy. That's pretty darn accurate for something that appears on its surface to be a random chance or personal choice. With every new study we're starting to see, risky behaviors like binge drinking comes down to a few key factors. This study lasted a few years and it was the largest of its kind. It involved scanning the brains of over 700 14-year-olds. They monitored 40 variables, including brain function, personality traits, IQ, life experiences, and, of course, drinking habits. When they followed up 2 years later, there were a few striking, but perhaps not so surprising findings. First, there was a strong correlation between binge drinking and personality types. Specifically, Thrill seekers are much more likely to binge drink. Teenagers whose family have a history of drug abuse were predictably higher risk. They also found a huge spike in binge drinking happen amongst those that had so much as tried alcohol when they were 14, possibly because having a drink at 14 is more common amongst risk-taking types. And scientists also found something very interesting in the participants' brain structures. Those who were binge drinkers had a less developed prefrontal cortex, which is the area commonly connected with teenage recklessness and making bad decisions. It's the part of the brain that helps adults understand and weigh the consequences of their actions, and it's the last part of the brain to mature. They also found that the binge drinkers have bigger brains. As the brain matures throughout your teen years, it's actually normal for the brain to get slightly smaller as it rewires to be more efficient. So the teenagers with larger and less mature brains were more likely to binge. So the takeaway here, there's an increasingly predictable web of social and genetic factors that we need to look at when we're trying to prevent things like drug addiction and alcoholism later in life. It's not just a matter of, hey, you darn kids, stop doing this bad thing. It's looking more and more like addictive behavior is something that people are disposed to and actually need a little bit more help with.
Let's move on to tobacco. So we all know the dangers of tobacco, but lots of us still indulge in it. A smaller proportion of teens smoke than did in the prior decades, but the numbers are still very high in that aspect. Smoking is is on the rise for girls, and several countries like Austria, Norway, and even Sweden. White children and children of lower social economic status households are more likely to experiment with smoking. And it's becoming more and more difficult to find a comfortable place to smoke, as there are areas that are smoke-free. So why would teens want to smoke? It can be seen as a rite of passage, can be seen as a sign of growing up. Teens may even see influential models smoke, like celebrities. Maybe their parents smoke. Maybe their peers or their best friends smoke. Cigarettes are very addictive. The nicotine, which is an active chemical ingredient in cigarettes, can lead to biological and psychological dependency very quickly. People who smoke as few as 10 cigarettes early in their lives stand an 80% chance of becoming habitual smokers. One of the newest trends is e-cigarettes. It is a battery-powered cigarette device that delivers nicotine that is vaporized to form a mist. It appears to be less harmful than the traditional cigarettes, but this is known as vaping. But in recent research, vaping has been shown to be very bad. It can cause pneumonia, which is a very bad thing. I want to show you a video about vaping and what it does to your body. Let's watch the video about vaping.
This is an x-ray of a patient's lungs. And here's an x-ray of those same lungs just 5 days later. See all that light gray? That's fluid, which filled their lungs because of a life-threatening lung disease, linked to vaping. For years, vaping has been touted as a safer alternative to smoking cigarettes. But now, some vaping products are killing people. So what's going on? And is it really bad for you? Vaping typically refers to inhaling an aerosol, which contains either nicotine, in the case of e-cigarettes, or some form of cannabis, such as the psychoactive chemical THC. And in the last few years, it has exploded in popularity, especially among teens. I mean, just look at this graph. It shows the percent of high school students who use e-cigarettes. In 2018, it was over 20%. And that's what makes this news so scary.
A patient died from a severe respiratory illness, and it could be the country's first vaping-related death.
That was in August of 2019. And by early September, the number of reported deaths linked to vaping had climbed to at least 6. Not to mention, there were at least 450 possible lung injuries tied to both THC and nicotine vape pens.
I have been saying this from the beginning. Looks like it's becoming an epidemic.
That's Dr. Melody Prasada, who's treated at least 2 patients with what she calls vaping-associated lung injury.
So over here we are seeing our 18-year-old patient who, when he first presented to the emergency room with chest pain, fever, coughing, and vomiting, And as you see over here, it is the black is for the lungs, and you see nice still black.
But 5 days later, his lungs were filled with fluid because of inflammation, which she said was linked to vaping THC.
Once you come to this point, the chance of dying can be as high as 70%.
So what's causing all that inflammation, all of these lung injuries? The short answer is, we don't really know. Doctors say it's likely not the nicotine or THC itself, but rather other chemicals inside the liquid which get vaporized when you inhale. One possible culprit is vitamin E acetate, which health officials have found inside many vape pens that have been linked to the recent string of lung injuries.
When you start inhaling oils, any type of oil, vitamin E is an oil. Any type of oil, if you start to inhale to your lungs, you are going to create problem inside your alveoli.
Alveoli are small bubbles inside your lungs that transfer oxygen to your blood. And she says that vitamin E could interfere with a lining that surrounds them called pulmonary surfactant. But according to Dr. Mikhail Kazachkov,
I don't think vitamin E is the only guilty, substance here.
Because when it comes to vape pens,
you're going to inhale dozens of other substances, which are not necessarily advertised, but they're there. There is definitely needs to be a carrier, a vehicle, because nicotine cannot be delivered just in a pure form.
Until researchers find out what's behind vaping-associated lung injuries, the CDC says don't vape. But here's the thing. Lung injuries, they're actually not the only risk associated with vaping. One small study, for example, found that kids who used e-cigarettes might be exposed to higher levels of nicotine than those who used traditional cigarettes.
It would not be unusual to have extraordinary high concentration of nicotine in vape.
And
nicotine is not benign.
It raises your blood pressure, which can increase the risk of having a heart attack. And if you're a teen,
it is known to cause problems with the brain development.
Not to mention, it's highly addictive. Now you might be thinking, well, isn't vaping still better for you than smoking? But the answer isn't so simple. You see, smoking is really bad. It kills more than 480,000 Americans each year. And vaporizers, they typically contain fewer toxic chemicals than the 7,000 or so found in cigarettes. But at least in the short term,
there's absolutely no reason to say that vaping is healthier than smoking. In my opinion, vaping is worse because we are scared. We don't know what to do.
So if nothing else, there's probably a better alternative to smoking than vaping. And if you're not already a smoker, you definitely should not start vaping now.
It is at this point very clear that vaping is not only unhealthy, but it is very dangerous. This is not anymore a debate. This is a proven fact that vaping is killing people.
Moving on to STDs, or sexually transmitted diseases, let's talk about AIDS first. It is called acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, or AIDS. It is one of the leading causes of death of young people across the world. AIDS has no cure, but scientists are working on that. It can be treatable with drugs. The worldwide death toll from the disease is significant. AIDS is classified as a sexually transmitted infection, or an STI. It began as a problem that primarily affected gays, but it has spread to other populations as well. So it includes heterosexual and intravenous drug users. African Americans and Hispanics account for 70% of new AIDS cases, and African American males have almost 8 times the prevalence of AIDS as white males. Over 35 million people have died from AIDS, and people living with the virus that cause AIDS number 70 million worldwide. But it is declining, so that's a good thing, and there are fewer deaths due to AIDS nowadays. So how do you get AIDS? It is it's transmitted through an exchange of body fluids, so semen or blood. AIDS is the deadliest STI, but there are other STIs out there that are common. The most common STI is the human papillomavirus, or the HPV. It can be transmitted through genital contact without intercourse. Most infections don't have symptoms, but it can produce genital warts and can even lead to cervical cancer. There is a vaccine out there that protects against some kinds of HPV. Girls from 11 to 12 years of age are recommended to get the HPV shot. I remember getting the HPV shot when it very first came out. It's a shot. You get 3 vaccines. I think you go once a month for 3 months, I believe. But it was the newest thing when I got it. There's been a lot of controversy on that as well. Some say it does not do anything at all. Some say it definitely helps. I got it because my doctor recommended it because it was the newest thing on the market at that point in time. I've heard people say that they got the HPV vaccine and then it caused some issues later on down the road. It caused them to have cancer. So again, it's very controversial. That is just something you would want to ask your doctor if you haven't gotten it already. That's something you would want to ask your doctor about. Another STI is trichomoniasis. So that's an infection of the vagina or penis that is caused by a parasite. Initially, it is without symptoms, but it eventually causes a painful discharge. Chlamydia is a bacterial infection. It initially has few symptoms, but later on it can bring burning urination and a discharge from the penis or vagina. It can lead to pelvic inflammation or even sterility. Chlamydia can be treated successfully, though, with antibiotics. Moving on to genital herpes, that is a virus. The first symptoms are often small blisters or sores around the genitals, which may break open and are quite painful. The sores may heal after a few weeks. If the infection often reoccurs after an interval, the cycle will repeat itself. When the sores reappear, the infection is contagious, and there is no cure for genital herpes. Gonorrhea and syphilis, or other STDs or STIs, they have been recorded by ancient historians, so they have been here for a very, very long time. Before antibiotics, gonorrhea and syphilis were very deadly, but now they are treatable because of antibiotics. If you have any questions, please let me know. We can discuss it on chat, which I'm there Tuesdays and Thursdays during your class time. Just please let me know. I hope you all have a great day, and thanks for watching.